Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining here. As was mentioned, my name's Dan, I'm part of the sports team at Ampere. And we can just go over a bit of an agenda in terms of the topics that we're going to cover in the next 15 minutes or so. So the first thing is we're going to contextualise where investment in live sports is in the context of increased competition from streaming companies. We're going to look at who the main rights buyers have been historically over the last few years, and that tends to have been those in the pure play sports streaming model. And we'll have a look at the pros and cons of that model in more detail. We're going to look at the level of investment that's been increasing from other types of services, so general entertainment services as well. And finally, we're going to put into context where the direct-to-consumer services of sports bodies and sports federations fits into the wider investment in sports streaming broadcasting. But to begin with, we're going to see how sports content more generally has been lagging behind in terms of investment from streaming companies as the streaming wars have progressed. Across the last 5 to 10 years, we have seen a general shift in the way that consumers do engage with video content. Historically, of course, linear broadcast TV has accounted for the majority of share in the way in which time spent viewing content. But we have seen, as we can see here on the blue bar, this share of time has started to shift, and we're looking at self-reported data among consumers in the US and a selection of Western European markets here. In its place, we have seen the growth in amount of time spent watching content on-demand platforms, and in particular, we can see in the orange bar that subscription-OTT viewing time now accounts for around a quarter of time spent watching content more generally. So while this is self-reported viewing data, it is indicative of the general trend, the direction of travel of the way in which content is being viewed. And this shift has led to a fairly rapid growth in level of investment among subscription OTT services in terms of the content that they are investing in. So here we're looking at the level of annual global spend, share of total global spend that comes from subscription OTT services. The amount spent has more than trebled since 2017, and subscription OTT services now account for almost 30% of total spend on original non-sport content. So we can see the level of commitment as more services have entered the market. We can see their level of commitment to creating an attractive catalogue for potential subscribers. And this general trend is not unique just to entertainment content. So here we're looking at our sports consumer survey data. And what we can see across the 12 markets that we survey, that sports fans are also quite keen to watch content via streaming services. The middle chart in particular shows that all sports fans and almost double the amount of fans want to watch content, live sport content, only via a streaming service, compared to just 21% who want to watch via broadcast TV. This contrast is even more stark when we look just at 18 to 34-year-olds. But interestingly, as we look at older sports fans as well, this is still the trend where more fans want to watch via streaming services than broadcast TV. So we can see that this trend more generally is related to the world of sport as well. But when we look at the level of investment in sport from streamers, we can see that it has continued to lag behind the level of investment in alternative content. So here we're looking at the same chart that we were before, and the level of subscription OTT share of total global spend on original content. And we can now compare it to their share of spend on live sports rights content, which is just at 13% as of 2022. So even though the demand is there for fans to view content on these types of services, this hasn't been reflected in the level of investment from streamers. Why is this? Well, one of the key factors is content delivery and the challenges around it. So again, looking at our sports consumer survey data, we can see that over half of sports fans would rather not watch at all than watch their favorite sports with bad coverage. And by inherently, sports by its very nature does require a high quality feed, and it requires minimal latency. I know it's really not ideal when you're watching a game and you get a notification that a goal's gone in before you've actually watched it live. And this has represented some challenges for streaming because of the technological issues in terms of ensuring that you can broadcast the game to millions of people across the internet. And this has required a really significant level of investment from streamers, and the technology has only started to mature in recent years. So streamers are only now becoming more confident in being able to broadcast live sports on their services. So historically, the challenges around content delivery has been a really key factor in why sports content has lagged behind other types of content in terms of investment for their services. But we did see a certain level of investment in sports content among streamers, and this has largely come from pure play services, so services that focus purely on sport. And we're going to look at the business model of this by focusing on potentially the biggest disruptor to the market more generally, which is DAZN. So DAZN, since its launch in 2016, has been the major streaming rights buyer of sports content globally. And we can see that up until in 2022, it actually surpassed Paramount to become the 5th largest investor in sports content globally. Its strategy focuses on more niche content on a more global scale, so smaller competitions, and also investing more heavily in major rights deals in its key markets that it's allocated as its core territories. And what we can see here is some of the opportunities for a pure play streamer and some of the challenges that are represented as well. So by becoming almost a one-stop shop or the home of sport in particular markets, DAZN has been able to get a really attractive solution for sports fans within these territories, and that's driven fairly significant subscription growth and therefore subscription revenue growth that we can see here. On the other side of things, sports content can be very expensive, and the increased investment that's been required to create that attractive portfolio has meant that operating losses have remained at above $1 billion per year since 2019. DAZN is confident that its costs will remain fairly similar for the next few years because it has acquired the rights for the next couple of years that it wants in its major markets. And as a result, it can now focus on achieving profitability by the end of 2024. How does it do this? One of the key ways, of course, is generating further subscription growth and therefore subscription revenue growth. And one key part of the strategy will be to invest or adjust its pricing model. So rather than just offering one price for all of its content, it will look at adjusting its pricing to offer certain types of competitions to sports fans at a lower price that might attract increased engagement from fans who don't want to spend as heavily as others. But outside of subscriptions, DAZN has also looked at diversifying its revenue streams in order to achieve this profitability. And we can see some of these different revenue streams here. So in 2023, DAZN expects advertising revenue to account for around 10% of total revenues. And we do have a mention of fast channels again here as well, because they are looking at continuing to launch fast channels, including a women's sports channel in Germany. DAZN is looking at entering the e-commerce space through merchandising and ticketing. In 2021, the service launched a betting app in some of its core markets, and that can be integrated with its streaming platform to enhance the viewing experience of its subscriber base. And it has also entered the NFT marketplace as well, with a couple of marketplaces around its Japanese content and its boxing content. So DAZN's really leading the way in showing how a pure play service needs to adjust its strategy to enhance the chances of it achieving profitability by diversifying its revenue streams and becoming less reliant just upon subscriptions. More recently, though, we have seen different types of services start to invest in sports as well. And these are more general entertainment services that initially have been focusing on entertainment content, but are now starting to grow their investment in sports rights. For a little bit of context, ever since the general boom of 2020 and the growth of subscription OTT services more globally, we are starting to now see subscription OTT subscriber growth start to slow down, to the point where in 2023 we expect the growth rate in North America to be just 4%, its first single finger year. And this is expected to, as we can see from the forecast, to be the case for the following few years as well. So during this time, these types of entertainment services are going to have to look to alternative solutions in order to maintain subscriber growth in an increasingly competitive and saturated market. And sports can be a really key way of doing this. So what we're looking at here is the proportion of sports fans who agree with the statement that they only care about sports really and don't watch much TV or film content. And we can see that both in the US and among EU Big Five sports fans, that this is quite a large proportion of sports fans. And these are people who these more general entertainment services would not be able to tap into were they to only invest in entertainment content. So sports can be a key way in which they can then engage a certain area of consumers that they might not initially be able to attract. And because of this attraction, we are starting to see further investment from these general entertainment services. So we're looking at the top 10 services by global spend on sports in last year, in 2022. Naturally, DAZN is at the top, but below that, we do have Amazon Prime Video and Viaplay as well, which are both global streaming platforms that have started to step up their investment in sport. And these types of services are really well positioned, actually, to become key investors in sport. One key factor is the mitigation of the risk of churn. So at the end of a season, or if they lose the rights to a competition, these services still have an attractive portfolio of content. That means they can still maintain subscribers and people aren't going to churn from their service. They can also cover their costs a little bit more. As we saw before, sports rights are incredibly expensive, but being able to spread those costs across a wider subscriber base outside of just sport-specific fans and subscribers, this becomes less of a risk in terms of its investment for these services. So because of these attractions for these more general entertainment services, we do expect them to become an increasingly important type of investor in the sports rights market moving forward. And lastly, we are going to have a look at direct-to-consumer services of sports bodies. So we're looking here at 4 examples of D2C platforms, and we can see by the shaded areas, no we can't, we could see, yeah, and we can again, the level of coverage that they offer for a specific sports body, so they can reach areas on a global scale now more directly. But these platforms, sports bodies won't want to rely on these platforms in particular because the federations can still generate a higher amount of revenue from striking partnerships with broadcast partners. On the other hand, these services are really useful in terms of offering complementary coverage. So while there'll be a main broadcast partner in a territory, these services will offer additional content that might be able to serve more committed fans who want to watch additional things, and the sports bodies can more directly monetize these types of fans. At the same time, they can be useful in rights negotiations for a sports body, being able to go into a conversation during the sales process and say, look, if you want to become the exclusive broadcaster to this event, you're going to have to pay us more. Otherwise, we're going to show content on our own platforms. So these can be a really useful tool, and we expect them to continue to grow as streaming technology continues to improve. But at the same time, for now, they really serve as a secondary service for sports bodies, and we don't expect them to be the main way in which broadcasting these kind of competitions are being broadcast. So as we come to the end of the 15 minutes, I'm just going to look at some of the key takeaways. So firstly, growing competition from OTC services is likely to sustain the value of the sports rights market. And this is as more traditional players are facing growing pressures from what we saw around the direction of eyeballs moving away from linear towards streaming. The pure play sports OTT model will evolve. And we saw this around DAZN and its diversification of its investments and its revenue streams. And finally, OTT will offer opportunities to experiment, and we can see this through, for example, DAZN being keen to tailor its pricing strategies in particular. And I'm aware I've just gone slightly over time, but thank you very much for listening. If you do have any questions, I'll be here afterwards, and you can scan the QR code if you do want a copy of these slides as well.
I think we might have time to get one question in. Does anybody have a question for Daniel? Any questions? I can't really see. No? Okay, I think we'll let you go then, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.